Power at this level isn't protected by bodyguards, walls, or even armies. It's protected by systems, silent, automated, and already in motion long before any human reacts. Somewhere above the earth and far beneath solid rock, trillions of dollars have been spent preparing for a moment no president ever wants to face. Watch until the end, because what you're about to see isn't a bunker or a plane, it's the most expensive, invisible survival machine ever built to preserve authority itself. Space Eyes, the first 30 seconds that decide everything. The first 30 seconds of a nuclear crisis do not belong to politicians, generals, or presidents. They belong to heat, because long before a headline is written or a phone rings, an invisible system is already watching the planet breathe. Far above the atmosphere, in geosynchronous orbit, roughly 22,000 miles above Earth, the space-based infrared system hangs in silence, a constellation that cost the United States more than $12 billion to design, launch, and maintain, not to look impressive, but to remove uncertainty from the very first moment a missile leaves the ground. These satellites are not cameras in the cinematic sense. Each unit, estimated at over $1.5 billion per satellite, exists to detect a single physical truth: the infrared heat plume created when a ballistic missile ignites, a signal so distinct that it can be recognized through cloud cover, darkness, and deception. This layer exists for one reason only: speed without ambiguity, because at the highest level of power, time is the most expensive asset of all. When a launch occurs, the satellite does not ask who fired it or why. It measures temperature curves, acceleration patterns, and burn profiles, comparing them against decades of classified launch data. That computation happens automatically, because human hesitation is a liability in a 6-minute decision window. The moment the system flags a plume as hostile, encrypted data streams forward at near light speed, bypassing media, bypassing politics, and bypassing emotion entirely, ensuring that the president's first awareness of an attack is not shaped by chaos but by math. What makes this system extraordinary is not just its cost, but its design philosophy. Unlike luxury assets built to impress, SBIRS is built to disappear. It has no public interface, no broadcast signal, and no tolerance for spectacle. Its value lies in continuity. By existing permanently above conflict zones, it denies adversaries the advantage of surprise, which is the most dangerous form of power. This is why the United States continues to invest billions more into next-generation infrared satellites under the Next-Gen OPIR program, projected to exceed $14 billion, not to escalate war, but to ensure that decision-making survives first contact. In this system, the president is not the beginning of authority, he is the final checkpoint. By the time a human is briefed, the machine has already narrowed reality to a few possible truths. That is the real luxury here, a structure so expensive and so precise that it buys clarity when clarity is otherwise impossible. And as we move forward, the next layer reveals what happens once those 30 seconds expire, when rock and steel replace space and silence, and the countdown becomes physical. If you want to understand how power survives when time runs out, tell me in the comments which part of this system surprised you most, because the deeper layers are even less forgiving. Cheyenne Mountain, where reality gets verified. The moment space delivers a warning, authority does not rush upward toward a president, it sinks downward into stone. The infrared signal that first appeared as a heat anomaly in orbit is useless on its own, because power does not act on possibility, it acts on verification. That is why the data's next destination is not a palace or an aircraft, but Cheyenne Mountain Space Force Station, a facility whose very existence is a statement about how seriously uncertainty is treated. Built deep inside solid granite, at a cost exceeding $1 billion in Cold War-era construction alone, Cheyenne Mountain was never designed to look powerful. It was designed to survive being wrong. Inside this mountain, behind blast doors weighing more than 25 tons each, analysts do not debate motives or politics. They run models. The first task is numerical. How many missiles were launched, because scale determines everything that follows. A single trajectory suggests accident or test, dozens suggest strategy, hundreds suggest extinction-level intent. The second task is geometric, what paths those missiles are taking, because trajectory reveals origin, range, and sophistication. The third task is brutally practical, where they are expected to land, because deterrence collapses without knowing what is actually at risk. Every console, every algorithm, every human role inside Cheyenne exists to compress chaos into clarity. This facility is not luxurious, but it is extravagant in one very specific way: redundancy. Cheyenne Mountain sits on massive steel springs, an engineering solution costing tens of millions of dollars, allowing the entire complex to absorb shock waves from nearby nuclear detonations. Independent power systems, water reserves, and air filtration units ensure autonomous operation for weeks because continuity of command is itself a form of power. This is not a bunker built for comfort, it is infrastructure built to keep decision-making alive after the world changes shape. What makes Cheyenne Mountain truly expensive, however, is not concrete or steel, but institutional memory. In November 1979, a training tape accidentally loaded into NORAD's system simulated the launch of 1,400 Soviet intercontinental ballistic missiles. For 6 minutes, the United States stood on the edge of irreversible action. That near catastrophe rewrote doctrine forever. Confirmation protocols, cross-checks with independent radar systems, and human verification layers were added precisely because a false positive is more dangerous than a delayed truth. Cheyenne Mountain exists as a monument to that lesson, a place where machines are trusted only until they are doubted. Here, time is treated as a hostile variable. Every second that passes without confirmation is logged, challenged, and re-evaluated. Analysts are trained not to react quickly, but to react correctly, because speed without certainty is how power destroys itself. This is why Cheyenne Mountain remains active even in the age of cyber warfare and AI-driven analytics. With ongoing modernization programs costing hundreds of millions of dollars to keep legacy systems interoperable with next-generation sensors. By the time information leaves this mountain, it is no longer a warning, it is a verdict, and that verdict shapes everything that follows, from emergency conferences to presidential movement. If space is where threats are seen, Cheyenne Mountain is where reality is decided. If you want to understand how power avoids making its most expensive mistake, tell me in the comments which layer of this system you find most unsettling, because the next stage shows what happens once verification becomes action. Tracking, threat conference, and the 5-minute problem. Before power ever reaches the president, it is filtered through geometry, math, and silence. The most dangerous phase of a nuclear event is not the launch, but the moment when uncertainty collapses into certainty faster than humans can legally react. This is where ground-based early warning radars enter the story, not as dramatic weapons, but as the accountants of apocalypse. Stations in Alaska, Greenland, and the United Kingdom cost billions of dollars to build and maintain, yet their true value lies in a narrow window of 2 to 3 minutes, when possible becomes probable. These radars are designed to do one thing ruthlessly well: track objects moving faster than 15,000 miles per hour across the curvature of the Earth. Unlike satellites that see heat, radars see mass and motion. They calculate separation events, identifying when a missile bus releases multiple warheads, and estimate which cities sit beneath those trajectories. Each installation is hardened against electromagnetic pulses, buried or shielded, and backed by redundant power systems costing tens of millions of dollars, because losing radar data is equivalent to losing sight in a fistfight. Vision is survival. Once radar confirmation begins, the system triggers what may be the most consequential phone call on Earth, the Threat Assessment Conference. This is not a discussion, it is a synchronization ritual. 3 command nodes lock together in real time: NORAD, responsible for homeland warning; United States Strategic Command, custodian of nuclear forces; and the National Military Command Center inside the Pentagon. The infrastructure enabling this call, encrypted fiber lines, hardened satellite links, and EMP-protected terminals, represents decades of investment measured not in comfort but in certainty. What makes this phase uniquely dangerous is not technology, but protocol. The system is deliberately designed to distrust itself. Before a president is even disturbed, authorization chains require verification through the Secretary of Defense. This safeguard exists to prevent false alarms from triggering irreversible action, a lesson written in bloodless near misses like the 1979 NORAD training tape incident, when simulated data nearly provoked real retaliation. That caution, however, extracts a brutal price: time. In a worst-case scenario, 5 minutes can disappear while humans confirm what machines already know. During those minutes, warheads are still flying, submarines are still silent, and bombers remain grounded. The president, the single individual with launch authority, may still be asleep, unaware that clocks are already expiring on options. This is the paradox of modern power. The more sophisticated the system, the more carefully it slows itself down to avoid catastrophic error. Every asset involved here exists for control, not spectacle. The radars do not intimidate enemies, they inform decisions. The conference does not display dominance, it compresses chaos. Even the delay itself is strategic, a deliberate tax paid to avoid launching missiles at ghosts. This phase proves that survival at the highest level is not about speed alone, but about disciplined hesitation. And as the clock keeps running, the next layer reveals what happens when hesitation is no longer affordable. The nuclear football, menu of consequences, and one person's authority. The most dangerous object in the room is not a missile, a bunker, or even a bomber on standby. It is a 45-pound black briefcase that moves quietly, carried by a uniformed aide, whose job is to never be more than a few steps away from the president. The nuclear football does not look powerful, yet it represents a system whose total supporting architecture costs tens of billions of dollars and exists for a single purpose: compressing civilization-ending decisions into minutes without breaking the chain of command. The briefcase itself is not a luxury item in the traditional sense, but its engineering reflects absolute priority. Each unit is estimated to cost several $million when accounting for hardened communications hardware, encryption modules, life cycle replacement, and continuous security upgrades. It exists to ensure mobility of authority, allowing the presidency to function even if the White House ceases to exist. Power, in this context, must travel with the person, not the building. Inside the case sits the Black Book, roughly 75 loose-leaf pages that read less like strategy and more like logistics. These pages are not theoretical, they are pre-priced consequences. Every strike option represents decades of sunk cost in weapons systems, submarines, and bombers whose combined value exceeds $1 trillion. The book exists because improvisation is a liability under time pressure. Structure preserves control when emotion threatens it. Alongside the book is the Biscuit, a credit card-sized authentication device tied into the United States Nuclear Command and Control Network. While the physical card itself is trivial in cost, the cryptographic ecosystem supporting it is not. The NC-3 modernization program, which enables secure authentication and launch transmission, is projected to exceed $77 billion over the coming decade. Its role is not speed, but legitimacy. A launch order without verified identity is not power, it is chaos. Once the president is connected to the Missile Event Conference, Stratcom presents trajectories, impact estimates, and response packages. The 6-minute decision window exists because American land-based missiles, each silo hardened at a cost of tens of millions of dollars, must launch before they are destroyed. Delay equals disarmament. The system does not reward caution, it punishes hesitation. Critically, the Secretary of Defense can verify but not veto an order. This concentration of authority is intentional. Diffused power invites paralysis. Centralized power invites accountability. The system accepts the moral risk of one person deciding, because the operational risk of committee rule is greater. Every safeguard here exists to keep the machine from acting on noise, while still allowing it to act at all. This is not spectacle. It is governance stripped to function. Money here does not buy comfort, influence, or image. It buys continuity, clarity, and irreversibility management. And once the choice is authenticated, the system moves beyond the president entirely, into layers designed to survive even him. Evacuation as command, from White House bunker to the Doomsday Plane. Evacuation in this system is not escape. It is a transfer of command. The moment the ground becomes unreliable, authority moves, carrying the state with it. What looks like flight is actually continuity engineered under pressure. If warning time collapses to minutes, the president descends into the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, an underground facility beneath the White House designed for blast resistance, airtight isolation, and immediate command continuity. Its cost has never been publicly itemized, but experts estimate repeated upgrades across decades place its value in the hundreds of millions of dollars. The bunker exists for a narrow purpose: buying hours, not winning wars. It allows decisions to be made while the outside world becomes uncertain, but it is never meant to be permanent. When time allows, the system escalates. Marine One, a fleet of helicopters valued at roughly $20 million per aircraft, lifts the president away from fixed geography. The destination is Joint Base Andrews, not for safety, but for access. From there, authority moves into the air aboard the E-4B Nightwatch, a modified Boeing 747-200 that functions as a flying government. Each aircraft is estimated to be worth over $220 million, excluding decades of classified upgrades layered on top of the airframe. The E-4B costs approximately $159,000 per flight hour to operate. That expense exists because survival without command is meaningless. The aircraft is hardened against electromagnetic pulses, shielded so its electronics remain functional even after a nuclear detonation nearby. It can refuel mid-air indefinitely, with endurance tests reaching 35.4 hours non-stop, not for comfort, but for persistence. Inside, passenger luxury is replaced by consoles, cables, and secure rooms built for decision density, not visibility. One of its most unusual features is the trailing wire antenna, stretching miles behind the aircraft, enabling communication with submerged nuclear submarines worth several $billion each. This exists because deterrence only works if command can reach weapons that never surface. Power here is quiet, invisible, and deliberately unglamorous. This evacuation chain reveals a deeper logic. Wealth is not spent to protect a person, it is spent to protect decision flow. The president becomes mobile because authority must survive geography, physics, and panic. In this world, luxury is irrelevant, only function endures. Continuity bunkers and the nuclear triad that keeps control alive. You don't protect power by making it visible, you protect it by making it impossible to erase. When the White House, the Pentagon, even Washington itself become liabilities, authority doesn't collapse, it fractures, disperses, and hardens. That is where continuity bunkers come in. Facilities like Raven Rock Mountain Complex on the Pennsylvania-Maryland border and Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center in Virginia are not shelters in the civilian sense. They are underground cities, carved into granite, designed to function after the unthinkable. Raven Rock alone is estimated to support around 5,000 personnel, with its own power generation, medical facilities, dining halls, and blast doors engineered to withstand over 140 pounds per square inches of nuclear overpressure. Construction and lifetime upgrades place its value well into the multi-billion-dollar range, though exact figures remain classified. These bunkers exist for one reason: to ensure that leadership never occupies a single point of failure. Personnel are deliberately split into multiple continuity teams. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, rotated across locations so no single strike can decapitate governance. This is not paranoia. It is systems engineering applied to power. Redundancy is the currency here, not comfort. But bunkers alone do not guarantee control. Credibility comes from what still answers when the order is given. That is the role of the nuclear triad, a structure built to survive partial destruction and still function as a whole. On land, Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missiles sit in hardened silos across the American Midwest. Each missile system costs tens of millions of dollars, while the silos and command infrastructure around them push the investment into the hundreds of millions per site. They exist to force any adversary to expend enormous resources just to attempt neutralization. At sea, Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines operate as the quiet backbone of deterrence. Each submarine costs approximately $2 billion to build and carries Trident II missiles, themselves valued in the tens of millions per unit, with multiple warheads per missile. Their purpose is simple: invisibility. Even if everything on land is destroyed, these vessels ensure retaliation remains certain. In the air, platforms like the B-52 Stratofortress and B-2 Spirit add flexibility. A B-2 Spirit, costing over $2 billion per aircraft, exists not for efficiency but for survivability and recall. Bombers can be launched, redirected, or stood down, keeping decision space open when seconds matter. This system is not dramatic by design. It is cold, expensive, and deliberately boring. Its real achievement is not destruction, but continuity. Someone is always in charge. If you were inside this system, Which layer of redundancy would you trust most, the bunker, the submarine, or the aircraft? What this system ultimately reveals is not military strength, but how extreme wealth is converted into long-term power. First, the ultra-elite don't spend to look safe, they spend to remove decision friction. When seconds matter, money is used to pre-build choices, automate responses, and eliminate debate. Second, real power is never centralized in one place. Just as Asian billionaire families disperse assets across jurisdictions, bloodlines, and trusts, this system disperses leadership, command, and continuity so no single strike can erase control. Third, legacy is protected through redundancy, not symbolism. Planes, bunkers, satellites, and succession chains all exist to ensure influence survives individuals. If this analysis gave you a deeper perspective on how money quietly engineers control at the highest level, consider liking and subscribing to support long-form investigations like this. In the next video, we'll examine how private dynasties, not governments, build similar survival architectures to protect wealth across generations, entirely outside public view.